Road racing. It's a sport that is synonymous with Northern Ireland. Part of the fabric of life in many of our towns and villages. It is a sport that has given me great pleasure for many years. And at times, one that has caused me great pain. Such is the nature of road racing. For 100 years, local riders have been making their names, making history while racing on these roads.
I mind that day, thinking to myself, what am I doing here anyway among all these Grand Prix riders?
They have become some of our biggest sporting stars.
I feel proud that people would mention me in the same breath as incredible champions from here, like Joey Dunlop.
But alongside the racing, there is another story. One that has taken place in workshops and sheds across the country.
We were all mechanically minded. If it broke down, well, you fixed it. It just come natural to us.
It is about a burning desire to understand how a motorcycle works, how it can be made to work even better, how it can be made to go faster.
No other Grand Prix team had the mad professor. And it attracted a lot of attention.
It is a desire that connects with our past, to a time when the wheels of industry put Ulster on the map, and workers in our factories and fields made enduring connections with machinery. When they learnt how to solve problems and keep engines running. Skills that found new outlets in a sport forever associated with Northern Ireland. This is the story of how the love of speed and a passion for engineering have travelled side by side.
Looks rather like a cross between a helicopter and a streamlined motorcycle, which isn't surprising as its inventor once designed and raced motorcycles.
How they have helped define the sport of motorcycle road racing for 100 years and more. It is a story of remarkable pioneers and mavericks, many of them Ulster-Scots, who pursued and lived their dreams.
Morning.
I was 13, I think, when I went to my first race. Just as a small kid, you know, seeing the speed, the noise, the colour. I was terrified, absolutely terrified on the first lap. But by the time the day was over, I couldn't wait to go back again. It's been like that ever since, for the past 40 years, I suppose, now. I was always equally interested, if not more interested, in photographing the people and the paddock than I was in photographing the action. People who were just like me, just like my dad, my uncles that I went to the races with. I love photographing them in the pits, in the paddock, working at the bikes, capturing the wee quiet moments when they were on their own and the kind of intensity of the whole thing. I've been involved with the sport for quite a long time, but I know that there's a long history before that. And it'd be good to find out kind of about the way the sport developed here in this part of the world and the way the engineering side of things, the people who were interested in building the bikes and making the bikes better, how they influenced the sport and changed the direction of the sport, not just here, but worldwide. With Ulster's strong industrial heritage, it's not surprising that for many local people, an interest in machinery led to a passion for motorcycles. But those who wanted to race didn't go on the roads. They went to the beach, including here on McGilligan Strand, where sand racing first took place in 1911. You think it was breathing?
It is breathing.
Living animal. Living, breathing animal.
So
It is really just a bicycle with an engine in it,
basically just a
wee
bicycle
petrol
with an
tank.
engine. You start it by pedaling.
No! Get away! It's all shake, rattle and roll,
Yeah.
Everything's just going the whole time. Wee valve hammering away, boy.
You can see it all working, can't you?
It's all there, everything's in front of you. Do you ride this bike regularly yourself?
No, it's not an easy bike to ride, quite honestly. And the problem with it is that the engine stops when you stop because there's no clutch. So every time you stop the engine, you've got to get out and get off and push it off again to get going.
So they were kind of starting to race on the sand before the road?
I think they were racing on the sand before the road.
Yeah.
I mean, after all, the sand was a lot smoother than the roads were in those days. The roads were simply cart tracks. And most of the traffic was horse-drawn, so they weren't suitable. Whereas the sand was smooth and you could ride reasonably quickly on it.
How many bikes would have been in a race?
I think about 30.
Looked quite a full
Looked
field,
a
didn't
fairly
it?
full field in any pictures we've seen of it.
And the spectators were lined along the dunes in their thousands. Like it was a big spectacle.
And they didn't bring their bikes on trailers to an event like this. They'd have ridden them here.
Rid them here, raced them, and then
Ridden them home again
If they were still in one piece.
if they were still running.
and your grandfather raced it.
He raced on this beach, yeah, on an Indian, which would have been quite an exotic beast at the time. It's hard to imagine an Indian motorcycle coming over from America in the early 20s, if not before.
How far could you expect to ride a bike like this?
Back at this period, there were quite a few people who did endurance riding between Missenhead and Mallinhead. In other words, the full length of Ireland. And they did that almost non-stop.
You had a sore backside by the time you were finished.
You would have a very sore backside, indeed.
Okay, here we go. That's brilliant. That was great. Tell you what, it'll keep me fit. How about the bikes? And the winner is.
Yeah.
That was brilliant.
Yeah.
You can go the very best on it, John.
Quite difficult to control.
But you have it sussed.
Yeah.
You've done it before,
Done it before.
at least once.
And you can see how the engine goes at quite low revs.
Yes, yeah. Once you get it going.
Yeah, once you get it going.
It's a very physical business.
It is, quite physical.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need to be a young, fit man to ride this.
Well, I don't think that's either of us.
Neither of us. No.
I'd love to have a run along this great beach on a motorbike. But I'm not allowed to go on this one. So I'm going to go on that one. Being on McGillingan Strand, we're just a few miles down the road from the home of the Northwest 200, but it had its beginnings in this part of the world. But from those beginnings to where we are now, it was people from this part of the world that played a huge part in moving everything forward. As those enthusiasts sought to move the sport forward, they were also to create a remarkable opportunity for the people in power. In 1921, Northern Ireland had just come into existence, but was still beset with violence and uncertainty. Prime Minister James Craig had to change the narrative and present a more positive image of his new state. He was provided with a remarkable opportunity to do so by his fellow Ulster-Scot, the well-known entrepreneur, inventor and racing enthusiast, Harry Ferguson. It was the plan for an unprecedented sporting event, the first Ulster Grand Prix for cars and motorcycles, an opportunity that Craig would not pass by.
And here is some correspondence. You can see very clearly who this is from.
Harry Ferguson.
And a familiar name. So this is coming into the Ministry of Home Affairs. They received the letter on the 9th March 1922. He said that they would bring an enormous crowd of people to this country, and there's not an industry that would not benefit thereby. Farming, souvenir, hotel, printing, advertising, and he's not finished. Railway, shipping, distilling. In fact, every industry would have a reward. So he's seeing this as a huge event with great potential. And there's obviously been some previous correspondence or conversation, because he was on to say, you've already agreed that the scheme is sound and we are therefore require your permission for the use of the roads in the manner already outlined to you. And then goes on to talk about motorcycles, and particularly the Ulster Motorcycle Club, making their event as international in character as possible. And you can see how outward facing they want to make these events. This isn't just about Northern Ireland or Ulster, the name that they give to the Grand Prix.
The nitty-gritty is getting the road closing order. That's the thing that they need to get this thing off the ground.
Yeah. So Stephen, here is the Act, dated the 20th of June 1922. So again, from the start of those conversations and the correspondence that we have, it's very quick.
Less than 4 months.
Absolutely.
You do get the feeling when you look through this, there was somebody very well connected, and that they had the ear of the right people who were able to advance their cause, getting the road closing order, and they already had a race planned. They knew where they were going with this from the word go.
And it's pitched very, very cleverly.
Yeah.
I think this isn't just about, the motoring enthusiasts. This is a way, I think, to present a much more positive picture of Northern Ireland, really pushing the trade benefits that this can actually bring. But you can see the caution that's there about bringing any large assemblage of people together. But in the end, I think it's those financial and more outward-looking benefits that actually win the day and help get this through at such pace.
Plans for the first Ulster Grand Prix were well and truly underway. It was scheduled for the 14th of October 1922 on what became known as the Claddy Circuit, public roads between the towns of Crumlin and Antrim. The motorcycle race was to attract 75 entries, including top British and Irish riders. The forward-thinking organisers even hoped to have a women's car race, but all plans for cars were dropped and the event became solely for bikes. Today, local women such as Yvonne Montgomery and Melissa Kennedy are well-established motorcycle road racers. Have you had any kind of real obstacles put in your path?
I've never felt that there's any obstacles in my way at all, but certainly whenever I first came into it, I noticed, not so much the other racers, but maybe in other circles within the sport, that you were just a girl and, just out there to ride around. I don't think they realised we went out there to race and we're determined. It wasn't just a bit of a pastime just racing, it was a determined thing that we wanted to race and pass and make places and go well.
There was somebody in Ireland who was ploughing the same kind of furrows you have been doing a long, long time before that. There's a woman called Muriel Hine.
Wow. Oh man, she's in normal clothes. No leathers. That is absolutely fantastic.
Muriel Hind was born in Dorset in 1882 and 30 years later became the first woman to compete in an Irish motorcycle event. finishing 16th in a reliability trial, which went from one end of Ireland to the other. Shortly afterwards, Muriel retired from racing, but continued to write a column in a weekly motorcycling magazine. Can you imagine what some of the issues that Muriel might have come up against? She was going.
The hurdles that she must have had to cross just to be allowed to compete at all, because everything was very male dominated in those days. The woman was in the house and that was it. You know, she was there to look after the men folk, and for her to do something which was on a par with men just must have been fabulous to see her do that. I would think she would have got very little support anywhere.
That's what Muriel said it was like to be racing a bike in 1912. I like the feeling of power, life, the mighty rushing wind beating on one's cheeks with the roar of the passing breeze and the beat of the exhaust deafening one's ears.
Nothing's changed, that's exactly right. It's nearly 100 years ago, that woman was saying the same sort of things that we have now. So that hasn't changed anything. It's just the most awesome experience ever.
This is the starting grid at Dundrod. It became home to the Ulster Grand Prix in 1953, just a few miles from the original Claddagh circuit, where they raced during the 20s and 30s. It's always been a very special place. There's some great days of racing here. The biggest names in the world were here: Mike Hillwood, Giacomo Agostini, Bill Ivey, Phil Reid. And then way back before that, Stanley Woods, Jimmy Guthrie. So everybody who was anybody in road racing has come to the Ulster Grand Prix at some time in their career. The original Ulster Grand Prix course was called the Claddagh circuit. It was completely separate from Dundrod, didn't incorporate any of this track at all. But it'd be interesting to go and find parts of the old Claddagh circuit, because it was very, very famous. A lot of it is still there. Some of it has been, the road layout and so on has changed, but it'd be nice to try and discover some of it today. This is the start and finish area of the Claddagh course at Carneglis. This part of the road here is part of the old road, the original road. There's a new road. The new road runs parallel. There's just a wee bit of this left, and it's a lay-by nowadays. You can still see the cat's eyes embedded in the road. And the bikes would have set off from up here, straight down through here into the first left-hand corner. The start banner across the road. It's great to see all the riders getting ready for the start. They've got big numbers on their backs. If the timekeepers don't see them coming towards them, then they'll get them going away. Look at the grandstand, look how steep it is. Absolutely packed. You get a sense of the excitement of this, because there's just so many people. Everybody was anticipating what was about to happen. old circuit used to go on down there, on down that road to Aldergrove Corner. During the Second World War, the airfield was extended and it took over part of the road network. And so this part of the course was lost, and it meant that the Clary course changed. It was a much shortened course after the war. I think about 4 miles shorter. And so that the part that's inside there is kind of preserved forever, as it was. It's a nice thought. He's straight through the hedge. And they gather him up, give him a push and he's away again. There's another one off. Aldergrove must have been a hairy corner. 3 in a row. They all seem to be running just that wee bit too wide. Thankfully, they're not going too fast. No, he was. He's straight over the hedge. Big high side there. They're on their feet before the bike has stopped moving. And then they're climbing back into the hedge to trail their bike out and get going again. The 7 mile straight. 7 straight miles. This is a map of the old Clary circuit. You can see here, it's this dead straight line all the way up to here, Clary Corner. A tight hairpin here, and the start and finish was just along here somewhere. So you hadn't far to go till the end of the race on the last lap. But many's a race that come down to what happened here at Clary Corner. They're not going very fast round it. That's one good thing. My God, look at the size of the crowd. The crowd goes all the way down the 7 mile straight, both sides of the road. There's literally thousands and thousands of people. It's as far as the eye can see down the straight. This was kind of the climax of the whole race on the last lap, so everybody wanted to be at the centre of the action. You know, a lot of it has changed. A lot of it is so different. But in some other ways, it hasn't changed all that much. Just the enthusiasm of the crowd and where they stay, just being so close to the edge of the road, so that they're nearly part of the action. Some of those things are still there from road racing today. With the Ulster Grand Prix up and running, it continued uninterrupted until the Second World War, with wins for local riders such as Joe Craig, Jimmy Shaw and Walter Rusk. But Joe Craig's greatest success came after the war. Not as a rider, but as manager of the factory Norton team. It was one of the best in the world and included top Grand Prix racers Artie Bell from Belfast and Jeff Duke from Lancashire.
And there is the Wizard of Tune from Norton's Joe Craig with Artie Bell, the man who won the senior TT.
Also working with the team was a self-taught engineer and designer, an Ulster-Scot from Hillsborough, County Down, Rex McCandless.
And there's Rex McCandless of spring frame, very difficult thing to say that. Here's the fitting of hairpin valve springs. Now careful, it looks as it's... But it's gone, yes, there, butterfingers.
By the late 40s, Norton were racing machines little different to those from before the war. But Rex McCandless was about to change all that by applying his mind not to the motorcycle engine, but to its frame.
Rex, he said everybody wanted to improve the engine in a motorbike, but he said nobody thought about its road holding capabilities, whether it was stable on the road, whether the wheels were in touch with the tarmac most of the time or not, and in those days they weren't. It was all road racing, so suspension was actually incredibly important, and it was mostly overlooked. He decided that most motorbike frames were twisting under the stresses of road racing, so he came up with what became known as the featherbed frame.
How did it come to be known as the featherbed frame?
It was christened that by another rider because they said it was so comfortable and smooth. It was like riding on a feather bed. The featherbed frame here had a lovely big round tube with nice sweeping curves on it. These would have been quite hard to make and not common on earlier machines. Earlier machines tended to be mostly straight tubes and usually smaller diameter as well. The rear suspension here, the swinging arm, would pivot here and then this would go up and down, and the shock absorber would then steady it on the road. And this was a big development over previous bikes. The headstock up at the front here gives for a nice rigid holding of the front forks and good steering. And then with the telescopic shock absorbers at the front, made the handling much, much better. The very first day he went out to a race, he had this, of course everyone looked at it and was laughing of the wobbly frame. And apparently at the end of the afternoon, after he'd won it, beaten them, they were queuing up to order these, and for once he made a bit of money actually selling these bolt-on swinging arm kits to some of the other competitors.
Motorcycles for the Isle of Man, racing motorcycles, and riders, mechanics, spare parts, managers and workshops, all to keep them on the road. Now, mind those bikes, they're the new Nortons. Gilbert Smith, Norton's managing director, with Rex McCandless, who designed their bike's frame. Hot favourites and white hope of single-cylinder fans. See that new duplex frame?
There's the maroon and the flag's down.
After successful trials, Norton took their bikes, complete with Rex's featherbed frame, to race in the 1950 Isle of Man TT.
Separated by only 20 seconds comes Artie Bell on the works Norton. Luck of the draw gives Geoffrey Duke number 57. He starts 160 seconds after Artie Bell. And the same in
Norton destroyed the opposition, with wins for Jeff Duke and Artie Bell in the senior and junior events, and securing the top 3 places in both races.
Duke's due through in a moment, and there he goes to complete his second lap. This'll surely be a record.
In the senior, Duke broke the race record by almost 11 minutes. With his featherbed frame, Rex McCandless had changed motorcycle design for decades to come. But with reputations as difficult and mercurial Ulstermen, Joe Craig and Rex McCandless already had a strained relationship by the time of the 1950 TT. Before long, Rex turned his attention to new projects, including this lightweight four-wheel drive military vehicle called the Mule. He developed it in partnership with Harry Ferguson, and the British Army showed interest in placing an order. But then there was another fallout. This time between Rex and Ferguson, and the Mule was abandoned. But Rex was relentless, constantly turning his mind to new challenges and projects, including this unlikely machine which he called the Auto Gyro.
It looks rather like a cross between a helicopter and a streamlined motorcycle, which isn't surprising as its inventor once designed and raced motorcycles.
And this is the prototype of the Auto Gyro. This is what he first took to the skies in.
This is the very first one with the little Triumph twin engine.
It has the ability to take off in a distance of roughly 60 yards and land in probably 20 yards. It isn't affected really by weather conditions as a fixed wing is. If you should lose yourself, you can come down and virtually look at the signposts and establish where you are. That's its main feature, that it can go short distances with great safety and at low cost. You can see the machine is simple, but the controls are also simple. You have, firstly, a rudder, which controls your direction you wish to travel in. You have a control stick here, which, when you pull it back, tilts the rotor vertically and allows you to climb, or by pushing it forward, you can descend.
Nothing would entice me to get into that thing, go into the sky. This looks so flimsy and bizarre.
It doesn't have the beauty of design that the featherbed frame
No,
had.
definitely not. He got so far with everything, and then it kind of stopped, and he didn't really get the plaudits or the rewards that he should have got.
I think it's a pity he wasn't more successful financially. I think he deserved to be. But there's no doubt that he did himself no favours when it came to establishing business partners. He always managed to rub them up the wrong way, make them look small and foolish, and eventually fall out with them. So a lot of the ideas that perhaps could have gone much further really stopped.
Stephen, can't chew that bike a minute. I hate to speak to that boy. He's more than a rowler to me. I hate to show him where to get.
This is my chance. They're so long. That's the thing about them, they're so long. You're at full stretch, your arms and all. It's in the tank. Amazing to think this thing won the Northwest 200 and Ulster Grand Prix. By the early 1960s, Italian and Japanese motorcycles were beginning their domination of the racing scene, with Belfast riders Tommy Robb and Ralph Bryans enjoying Grand Prix success on their Hondas. But in the mid-60s, Bushmills farmer Richard Creth proved there was still life in the Manx Norton and its featherbed frame, winning 2 Northwest 200s and the Ulster Grand Prix when it was still a World Championship race. Your most famous victory was at the Ulster Grand Prix, Dundrod in 1965. What was that day like for you?
I mind that day, sitting on the front row before the start, thinking to myself, what am I doing here anyway among all these Grand Prix riders?
You made your mark though.
Well, I thought I'm here and I'll just make my best to it.
The time when a lot of the big names like Mike Hillwood and Jim Redmond, Phil Reid and all people like that were racing. It wasn't an easy time to get a win.
If Hillwood had been there, I never would have won it. He had the World Championship won and they didn't have to come to the Ulster to get points.
Right.
So he withdrew. Yes. There was a chance then.
Was it a close race at the finish or did you make a break?
I got a good break and then in the last lap I eased off a wee bit. I think I finished about 8 or 10 seconds ahead of.
Not only had Richard won the race, he'd also won enough points to secure 6th place in that year's 500cc World Championship. The young farmer from Bushmills stood among the very best in the world.
Never would have won any of them races if it hadn't been Joe.
Yes, the Joe Ryan Norton, that came to the fore, yeah.
He gave me the bike, was capable of winning, and that was as good as any bike ever I met.
Joe Ryan from Ballyclare was not a professional engineer or mechanic. He sold and installed domestic fireplaces. But he was a skilled tuner with a passion for Norton motorcycles, and many local riders, like Richard, enjoyed great success on his machines, which became known as Fireplace Nortons. What was it that Joe Ryan did that made the bike so special?
He done everything. That was his whole life, just getting the bike to go quicker. He used to try to lighten the bike as much as possible. The like the frame would have come on round below the seat there. They would have had the handlebars cut half short, you know. She didn't look good, but everything was right.
But he actually had no engineering or mechanical training, sure he hadn't?
Oh, no. He had brains. He'd seen how things worked, and they made them work better.
You have your greatest moment in '65 when you won the Ulster Grand Prix, and then you decide it's time to hang up the ladders. Why did you want to finish there?
I had plenty of work here at home. I was on my own here at home at that time, and I was spending a lot of time away racing, and I had no ambition to go across the water or anywhere to race. And thought to myself, I'm just doing Irish races here for a tenner, and there a day coming where a chance I'll get wrecked at this. I'll end up in disaster. So I just made up my mind I'll stop this and just concentrate on the farming.
And that was it?
That was it. I never went back.
Did you miss it?
Oh, missed it. I missed it. Aye. But Joe encouraged me to do that. He says you shouldn't be doing that racing the year at all. He encouraged me to stop.
He didn't stand in your way at all?
No, he didn't, no. No, he said that was the right thing to do.
While Richard stopped racing at the peak of his career, other local riders were about to come to the fore and receive support from an unlikely source. In 1965, Gordon Blair, a motorcycle enthusiast from Larne and Professor of Mechanical Engineering at Queen's University Belfast, became involved in Irish road racing with machines that were designed and built in the university. Blair's pioneering research work helped produce light and powerful two-stroke engines. And in 1969, Queen's student Brian Steenson from Crossgar in County Down finished second to multiple world champion Giacomo Agostini at the Isle of Man TT and the Ulster Grand Prix. Tragically, Brian Steenson was killed at the following year's TT, aged just 20. And another rider, Ray McCulloch, stepped forward to race the university's bikes. He also helped to develop them, working as a technician in the university's engineering department alongside Gordon Blair. It was a partnership that was to deliver extraordinary success. Today, I'm meeting with Ray and one of Gordon Blair's students from those days, Robert Fleck. Let's see. It's a three-man operation, this. Huh? And only two of you know what's happening.
We'll have to
keep the fingers out of the road,
we'll
Robert.
have to suffer on with these days.
I'm still serving my apprenticeship. Let's carry on.
This is the QUB 500, the single cylinder that was built at Queen's, and it was the pride and joy of Professor Blair. But it was a devil of a thing to start.
Real hard.
Because it was a big single cylinder, you had to get a push.
Oh, did, yes. Oh,
yes.
You did. The compression was on just
yes,
one cylinder.
That's right. And I remember one day at Dundroad, got the bike started and warmed up a bit, and I took it out onto the grid, and I let the darn thing choke out. Well, I got a lesson from Professor Blair that day. So I did. He said, don't you ever let that happen again.
You'd have won a few races in this bike, Raymond, did you?
I won a few, yes. There were Manx Nortons and things like that I was competing against. And they weren't in the same region.
That's right.
The two-stroke was quicker.
Oh, far quicker.
I always remember you riding two-strokes.
Well, I started off actually, Tommy Graham gave me a 350 Norton one time, a race. Yeah, one of those four-stroke Nortons were like a JCB. They were real heavy. When you took that wee single-cylinder engine there, not near the same weight.
Siren of number 31, McCulloch beside him.
In August 1971, Ray lined up on the grid at the Ulster Grand Prix alongside the very best riders in the world.
McCulloch wasn't content to sit behind that rear wheel of Reed's. He seemed to have the speed, and he nailed him just past the grandstand.
And he beat them all. With future world champion Jarno Saarinen finishing second on his works Yamaha. The Japanese manufacturer was so impressed by Ray's result, it established a partnership with Blair and his team at Queen's to help develop its engines. I remember the famous photograph of you, Raymond, at Turnagroff. Yeah. And you're right over on your side, but you don't have your knee out or anything. And I remember asking you one time, was she sliding? Were them tires sliding? And you said, in those days, if she was sliding, that meant you were falling off. There was no in between.
There was no return from that.
No.
That's right.
Billy Reid took the photograph. I always think it's the best photograph, the best road racing photograph of all time. It's this man and machine and absolutely on the limit. Robert Fleck may have been introduced to the local racing scene as a student of Gordon Blair's during the 1970s. You ever want to be out there doing it yourself? You never wanted to race?
Rather them than me.
I'm the same, I'd rather take pictures. When he returned to Queen's in the 80s and became professor of the mechanical engineering department, he was to take the university's involvement in the sport to the highest level. Grand Prix racing with Belfast rider Jeremy McWilliams. The team was called QUB Team Optimum, Queen's University Belfast. It put Queen's on the map all around the world.
No other Grand Prix team had the mad professor. And it attracted a lot of attention at Grand Prix, and particularly from the media. I would get interviewed almost every day on Eurosport, so it gave a much wider audience to the work that Queen's were doing than would normally be possible. And it attracted a lot of students, to the university. International students, as well as local students. Mechanical engineering, and in particular the two-stroke engine work at Queen's is known all over the world.
And there was some spectacular success.
The big moment in 1998 was second place at the Sachsenring in Germany. And that was such an experience. I mean, Jeremy had beaten almost all of the works Aprilias, the works Hondas and whatever.
It was also a painful experience for you in 98 in Sachsenring, wasn't it?
It was, when it was one lap from the end and I knew that barring some spill or whatever, there was going to be something to cheer. I went back up to the pit wall, and unfortunately everybody from the team was on the pit wall, so there's about 15 of us. And with the swell, I managed to fall off the pit wall onto the circuit and hurt my nose, but it was well worth it.
All these years later, Jeremy McWilliams is still racing, and I've caught up with him at practice for the Northwest 200 to find out what it was like to compete at the highest level on a bike developed in his home city.
It was nice to be able to go back and give some feedback, and then basically the next time the bike came along, we're trying something a little bit different. A lot to do with carburation and different ways of designing the intake system on the bike, really. That's what I remember mostly about it. And exhaust work and porting work and all the engine work, which Ray took control of, I think, in the workshop.
It was a Northern Ireland squad. It was all people from home working together against the world, in a way.
The bikes were prepared to a point where we could race the factories. I remember the Japanese rider Yukawa and a couple of Italians getting really irate that our non-factory bike was beating their factory bikes. I remember in one instance, you know, I beat Yukawa to the line for third, and Yukawa was fourth on the factory bike, on the factory Honda, and I was on a customer Honda with a customer kit, but it was a customer kit that had been tweaked by QUB. Oh, yeah. And I remember afterwards, you know, usually riders give each other a fist pump or acknowledgement at the end, and he didn't. He wasn't up for that. If it hadn't been for that QUB 250 Yamaha, you know, the career would never have been what it was. I would have been still working in Chubb, fitting CCTV and doing electronic repairs like I was whenever I gave that job up to go racing. So it was a big undertaking at the time to do it, but I'm glad I've done it, of course, but it never would have happened had it not been for the QUB bikes.
Even today, I can still feel the thrill of being on the grid before the start of a race. It's full of tension, apprehension, and that hasn't changed over all the years. But as I look back, there's something fascinating about racing from all those different eras, from the 1920s through to the 50s, 60s and 70s. Maybe there's a danger of romanticising the past, but if that's what I'm doing, I'm not alone.
Peace, man!
This is the Goodwood Revival, a celebration of racing and machines from the past.
I think what makes here really special is it's very authentic, because everybody is in the costumes and the garages, the old bikes. The attention to detail is different than anywhere else. It feels real. It harks back to a time when British motorcycle manufacturing was a lot more successful.
The festival attracts tens of thousands of enthusiasts every year, and everyone is dressed to impress.
There's a lot of dead foxes around here. Come together, come on, let me do a wee picture of us together, lovely.
But it's the machines that really steal the show, that have an enduring fascination.
It is pretty much perfect, isn't it?
In continuing with road racing, we have maintained our own links with the past, but of course many have paid a heavy price for doing so. None more than the Dunlop family from Ballymoney, with the loss of brothers Joey and Robert, their brother-in-law Mervyn Robinson, and Robert's son, William. I never said much more than hello to Joey at any time. And I photographed him for 20 years because it was just, you just wanted to capture him doing his own thing. This was a typical moment where he jumped out of the back of the van and he was sitting looking out at the bike, and he just decided he was going to do something. He was going to make some change. Jumped out, tipped the bike on its side in the field, down his hands, his knees, and starts working away at the bike. And you know, even the people who are standing all around him here, they probably should be the people who are doing the work, that they're reduced to holding umbrellas and watching what Joey's doing. It was just a pure Joey Dunlop moment. Like his brothers Joey and Robert, Jim Dunlop was a highly talented rider. And though he gave up racing in the 1980s,
there must be some work goes on around here.
It seems his passion for working on bikes is as strong as ever.
That was a wee project that I done, putting an engine into a bicycle.
Class. It's a dinky wee engine though.
I made the exhaust so it was the same shape as a 125 exhaust.
You're sticking to the two-strokes anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And this was Sam's bike?
This is Sam's 125. Parked up, and I hope it's parked up forever.
Do you?
Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't want to see him out on it again.
Whenever you started racing, Jim, where did the mechanical know-how come from?
My father, because he worked at cars and worked at other people's cars, and not that he learnt as anything. He learnt me whenever I went in and said, how do you do this or how do you do that? Because I was stuck, and then he would have showed you how to do it or whatever. We were all mechanically minded We worked at cars and we worked at motorbikes. We bought old motorbikes, got them going and put them into the field. If it broke down, well, you fixed it. Well, you had to learn how to fix it, like, but it just come natural to us. We, like Robert, me and Joey was all the same. We all were able to do what we had to do just to get the thing going again. Whenever we were tuning our bikes, Mervyn wouldn't have told you too much about anything. And Joey was the same. Like, Joey would have helped me all right. Like, I'm in a racing with him one time, and he says to me, you know, you had the wrong tyre on. And I says, well, why do you not tell me that before I went out? And he says, well, why should I? You should have knew, like, you know what.
Who would have been the best engineer of the whole lot of you?
I would say Joey would have been the smartest. He actually worked in the works Hondas, where I don't think they ever got the permission to work on a works Honda. He did because they knew that he knew who he was talking about.
Like Joey was taking something that was built in a race shop in the factory in Japan and bringing it to Ballymoney and stripping it down and making it better.
They wouldn't have given that bike to anybody. And to let Joey see the inside of a works Honda, I think was special, that they knew he was special. And I think it actually helped them bring the bike on. And he's only a 5'8", and they are in Japan like engineers, and they had all at their disposal that they could. But yet, Joey and a works Honda was still able to mature the bike, bring the bike on, and get more speed out of the bike, which is, I would say, unknown. I think it's because he actually worked at the bike, knew what was done to the bike, knew every nut and bolt was tightened in the bike, and he had more confidence then to ride the bike at speed. Joey had to know if anything happened to him, it was his fault, it wasn't anybody else's fault, because he done it all himself. You know, everybody makes mistakes, and the mistake could be the last one.
Road racing especially.
As the Dunlop family shows, racing is a passion that can be passed on from generation to generation. Today, Robert's son Michael is still competing, with 21 TT victories to his name. Another local family with a strong racing heritage are the Rays from Larne. Johnny Ray was a top road racer back in the 1980s and early 90s, an Irish champion and TT winner who competed alongside Joey and Robert Dunlop. But his son Jonathan went in a different direction, to race on short circuits. Now he's a 6 times world superbike champion and our most successful international motorcycle racer.
So Jonathan, your family has had a long involvement in motorcycle racing. How did you get started yourself?
I think being born into that and being brought up around bikes, it was infectious. You know, I could see what winning meant to my dad, what losing meant, and I wanted a piece of it. I think it was my grandfather that got the little 50cc Italojet down the chimney, you know, from Santa Claus. And that Christmas Day, I was riding round and round the garden until the bike ran out of fuel. Growing up in a competitive ambience with Dad racing and, you know, winning, he won quite a few Irish and Ulster titles, you know, growing up. I wanted to race, you know, I wanted to compete. That was in the DNA, if you like.
You chose to go into the British Championships on the tracks and then from there on to the World Championships. Why did you go that road rather than the way your dad had went on the roads?
Completely honestly, I grew up in a family that really discouraged road racing. You know, quite ironic coming from my dad, but I can really remember my mom and dad at the dinner table telling me that if I decided to go road racing, I couldn't live in the house. You know, I'd have to move out, which was strange, but I was just discouraged and I had no real interest either.
We've met so many people involved in bike racing from this part of the world, going way back in time, like the very first racers and engineers, all the way through to yourself. Do you feel part of that history being here in this place?
I feel proud, to be honest, when I race and you see people traveling to support you. I feel proud that people would mention me in the same breath as incredible champions from here, like Joey Dunlop. I think it's much easier for me, to be fair, that all these past greats in engineering and racers, like Joey, like Jeremy McWilliams, they paved the way for me. You know what I mean? The normal guy on the street now understands what the Northwest 200 is, or the World Superbike Championship, because of, you know, these incredible riders from the past. So that's really nice for me, because let's not forget we're a very niche sport when it comes to world of sport, and but I think here, especially in this country, it's recognised as one of the premier sports in the country.
I started this journey at a road race in North Antrim. And I've come to another road race circuit near St Field in County Down to finish it. This is the old Temple 100 course. They don't use it for racing anymore, but there's still lots of places like this in Ireland where we still road race. It's pretty narrow. There's an amazing roller coaster section. You just couldn't believe that there was racing motorbikes on those roads. It is strange to think that it all goes back to that first Ulster Grand Prix and other road races 100 years ago. But perhaps it goes further back again, to our industrial past, to that part of our heritage that created a familiarity with machines and technology, and sparked a desire to innovate, inspiring people like Harry Ferguson, Rex McCandless, and those who worked away in their own sheds, getting ready for a Saturday afternoon. All the great riders that we have talked about in this film, people like Darty Bell, Richard Creth, Joey Dunlop, Robert Dunlop, they raced here. There's something about that stays with it. You can still feel it when you're here. And if you know about the history and you hear about it, it draws you back in again. That's how it was for me. I grew up hearing about these great racers, hearing the stories about the feats that they performed. And before you knew it, you were just immersed in it. And that's what keeps me coming back to it all the time.